Every gardener I know dreams of creating rich, dark compost. We call it black gold for a reason. It is honestly the best food you can give your soil. We dutifully collect our kitchen scraps, our grass clippings, and our fallen leaves. We build our piles with hope and dedication, believing we are doing everything right. Yet so often, that dream turns into a slow, frustrating reality. The pile just sits there, month after month, looking more like a heap of garden rubbish than the beautiful soil amendment we imagined. This is a problem many of us face, and it can be quite disheartening. The most common complaint I hear is about the smell. Instead of a pleasant, earthy scent, some piles develop a sour, ammonia-like odor. This often means something is wrong. Usually, it is a sign of too much nitrogen-rich material, like fresh grass clippings, and not enough air. The pile becomes a dense, soggy mat. Anaerobic bacteria, the kind that do not need oxygen, take over. They work very slowly and produce nasty smells. Your neighbors will not thank you for that, and it certainly does not inspire confidence in your composting abilities. It is a signal that your compost has stalled. Another issue is the speed, or rather the lack of it. You expect to have usable compost in a few months, but a year later, you can still recognize every leaf and twig. This happens when the pile lacks the right balance of ingredients. It might be too dry, putting the essential microbes to sleep, or it might not have enough green materials to provide the energy the microbes need to get working. A cold, inactive pile is a compost pile in name only. It is not breaking down. It is not creating the nutrient-rich humus your garden craves. It is just a waiting game, and gardeners are not always patient people. So we are left with a choice. We can give up on home composting and buy expensive bags of compost from the garden center. Or we can look for a better way. A way to work with nature, not against it. We need a method that is simple, effective, and uses materials we already have. What if I told you there is a secret ingredient sitting in your kitchen pantry right now? A simple, sweet liquid that can wake up your sleepy compost pile, eliminate odors, and deliver finished compost in a fraction of the usual time. It sounds like magic, but it is just good science. I love a good garden experiment. It is how we learn and grow as gardeners. Faced with my own slow-moving compost, I decided to try something different. I had heard whispers about using molasses to boost microbial activity. The goal was simple: to create a hot, fast, and sweet-smelling compost pile. I wanted to see if this common pantry staple could solve the problems that plague so many home composters. I decided to use the two most common ingredients in any garden: fresh grass clippings and dry shredded leaves. These are the classic greens and browns of composting. The setup for the experiment was straightforward. I had a large pile of dry shredded leaves from last autumn. These are my carbon source, the browns. I also had a wheelbarrow full of freshly mown grass, which is my nitrogen source, the greens. The problem with grass is that it compacts easily, blocking air and creating a slimy mess. The leaves, on the other hand, can take forever to break down on their own. My idea was to use the molasses to give the microbes an instant energy boost, encouraging them to break down both materials quickly and efficiently. Here's what I did. I mixed a simple solution in a bucket, about 1 cup of blackstrap molasses into 5 gallons of water. I stirred it until the thick, dark liquid was completely dissolved. Then, I took handfuls of the green grass clippings and dipped them into the molasses water. I let the excess water drip off, so the grass was damp, not soaking wet. The grass was now coated in a sugary film, a perfect feast for hungry microbes. This was the key step. I was essentially marinating the nitrogen source with a fast-acting carbohydrate. Next came the layering. I started with a thick base of the dry, shredded leaves in my compost bin. Then, I added a thin layer of the molasses-coated grass. I continued this layering process, alternating between the carbon-rich leaves and the sugar-coated nitrogen. My ratio was roughly 3 parts shredded leaves to 1 part grass by volume. This 3-to-1 ratio is crucial. It provides the right balance for the microbes to thrive. Too much grass, and the pile gets smelly. Too much leaf, and the pile stays cold. The experiment was now underway. The results were almost immediate and truly remarkable. Within 24 hours, the compost pile started to heat up significantly. When I plunged my hand into the center, it was noticeably warm. A hot pile is a working pile. This heat is generated by billions of aerobic microbes feasting on the ingredients and reproducing at an incredible rate. The simple sugars in the molasses provided an instant, high-energy food source. It was like giving the microbes a shot of espresso. They woke up from their slumber and got to work with vigor, breaking down the tough cellulose in the leaves and grass. One of the most surprising changes was the smell. Instead of the sharp, ammonia-like odor that often comes from piles with too much grass, my experimental pile had a sweet, earthy, almost malty aroma. It smelled like a brewery or a bakery, not a rubbish heap. This pleasant scent was a clear indicator that the right kind of decomposition was happening. The microbes were processing the nitrogen so efficiently that it was being incorporated into their bodies, not released as smelly ammonia gas. This also means more valuable nitrogen is being saved in the finished compost for your plants. The molasses does more than just feed the microbes. Blackstrap molasses, in particular, is rich in minerals like calcium, magnesium, iron, and potassium. These micronutrients are not only beneficial for the microbes themselves, but also enrich the final compost. You are essentially adding a mineral supplement directly into your soil amendment. This creates a more nutritionally complete product for your garden beds. The molasses acts as a chelating agent, which means it helps bind minerals in a form that is easier for both the microbes and, later, the plants to absorb. It is a win-win situation. Compared to a traditional pile without molasses, the difference was night and day. My regular compost pile, built with the same ingredients but just water, was much slower to heat up. It also had that slight off smell in the first week. The molasses pile, however, was a powerhouse of decomposition. The rapid heating process also helps to kill off weed seeds and potential plant pathogens, resulting in a cleaner, safer compost. The molasses gave the microbes the head start they needed to outcompete the bad anaerobic bacteria and set the pile on a fast track to becoming black gold. Are you ready to try this in your own garden? It is incredibly simple, and you do not need any special equipment. Let's walk through the steps for both a small compost bin and a larger, open pile. For a small bin, like a tumbler or a plastic stationary composter, the process is very manageable. First, gather your materials. You will need your browns, that's dry leaves, shredded cardboard, or straw, and your greens, like grass clippings and kitchen scraps. Aim for that magic ratio of about 3 parts browns to 1 part greens. Now, for the molasses magic. In a watering can or a bucket, mix about half a cup of blackstrap molasses with 2 to 3 gallons of water. Stir it well. As you add a layer of greens to your bin, sprinkle it with some of your browns. Then, pour some of the molasses solution over that layer, just enough to make it damp like a wrung-out sponge. Continue layering your browns, greens, and molasses water until the bin is full. If you are using a tumbler, give it a few turns every couple of days to keep it aerated. For a stationary bin, use a garden fork to turn the contents once a week. For a larger, freestanding pile in a corner of your garden, the principle is the same, just on a bigger scale. Start by building a pile at least 1 meter wide and 1 meter high. Begin with a thick layer of coarse browns, like twigs or wood chips, to ensure good airflow from the bottom. Then, start layering your shredded leaves and molasses-treated grass clippings. For a large pile, you can mix a larger batch of the solution, 1 cup of molasses to 5 gallons of water, and use a watering can to moisten each layer of greens as you build. The key to success with any compost pile is managing air and moisture. The pile should always feel moist, but never waterlogged. If you squeeze a handful, only a drop or 2 of water should come out. If it gets too dry, add more of your molasses water. If it gets too wet and smelly, mix in more dry browns to absorb the excess moisture and restore the balance. Turning the pile every week or 2 with a garden fork is crucial for a large pile. This introduces oxygen, which keeps the aerobic microbes happy and the pile cooking at high temperatures. The final proof of any composting method is in the garden. After just 6 to 8 weeks, my molasses-powered compost pile had transformed. What was once a heap of leaves and grass was now a dark, crumbly, and wonderfully rich material. It had that beautiful earthy smell that every gardener loves. It was ready to use. By comparison, my traditional pile was still a long way from being finished. The molasses method had cut the composting time by more than half, giving me a head start on the gardening season. I put the finished compost to the test in my raised vegetable beds. In one bed, I prepared the soil as usual. In an identical bed right next to it, I amended the soil with a generous 2-inch layer of the new molasses compost, working it into the top few inches of soil. I then planted tomato seedlings of the same variety and age in both beds. The results were plain to see. The tomatoes in the molasses compost bed grew faster, looked greener, and were visibly more robust. They developed thicker stems and more abundant foliage. As the season progressed, the difference became even more pronounced. The plants in the enriched bed produced more flowers and, ultimately, a larger harvest of tomatoes. The soil itself was transformed. It held moisture better after watering, meaning I had to water less often. It was also teeming with earthworms, a sure sign of a healthy living soil ecosystem. The compost had not just fed the plants, it had improved the fundamental structure and biology of the soil. It was creating a resilient and self-sustaining garden environment. This simple technique is a game changer for any gardener. It empowers you to create high-quality compost quickly and without fuss. You can turn your garden waste into a powerful resource that builds healthier soil and grows more nutritious food. I encourage you to give it a try. Do not be afraid to experiment with your own ratios and materials. Observe your pile, listen to what it is telling you through its smell and temperature, and adjust accordingly. You will be rewarded with the satisfaction of creating your own black gold and seeing your garden thrive like never before.